Hi guys, thanks so much for watching Speaking of Founders Mission. I'm Stephanie and today I'm here with Lisa Sterling, who is the founder and CEO of R3-engage. Lisa, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, it is my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me to join you.
Of course, I can't wait to hear your story. Let's start where you are right now and tell us a little bit about R3-engage.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know this sounds crazy, but amidst all of the chaos earlier this year, I made the decision that I wanted to step out of the corporate world and really launch my own consulting company. My goal was to be able to reach out and help lots of organizations and individuals experience just wonderful things at work. And so the whole concept behind R3-engage is it comes down to honestly three different things. It's really about reimagining, reinventing, and reinvesting in people, in culture, and in technology. And it for me was, it's something I've always been really passionate about. I like to be disruptive. I like to think about doing things in ways that others hadn't thought of or in ways that were better. And I like to continue to drive investment no matter how crazy the times are, no matter what's going on in our lives. And so that really is behind the concept. And when you reimagine, reinvent, and reinvest in people, you get new levels of engagement, which is kind of where the engage component comes into play.
You have a strong corporate history and you were an executive at a publicly traded company through the IPO.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us a little bit about how you got to that high level position within the company that you were at, and then what it was like to go through an IPO.
I'll start kind of back at the beginning. I did not grow up in the space that I most recently left in terms of at that executive level position or in HR for that matter. For people that know me or who take a peek at my background, you'll see I don't have what you would consider a traditional career. I have a number of work and career experiences that have all kind of been strung together that have gotten me to where I am today. And I think that is definitely one of the reasons why I was able to reach that executive level at, quite frankly, a young age, as a woman, and most importantly, and an organization that was desperately looking to go through a pretty radical transformation. And it's been highly advantageous to me. The way I look at my work history is really through a series of different experiences. I've always been in the space of talent or people or human capital, however you want to refer to it. But up until my most recent role at Ceridian, I always did that from a product side, a operations side, or from a sales side. And so those different elements really, in my opinion, made me a much more well-rounded individual. I think there's lots of people that aspire to be executives for whatever other reason, whether it's your W-2 or T4 growing, or you want the title or the accountability and authority, whatever that is. In order to do that successfully, you have to fundamentally understand how companies work. And I think that's been a big challenge for a lot of leaders who've launched themselves up to that level, especially in HR. No meaning any disrespect here, but many HR professionals who are at the executive level have lived in HR. Many of them don't actually understand how the underlying operations of the organization work or what the implications are if you decide to divest a portion of the organization. They don't necessarily understand truly how the company makes money and how the financial strategies are built and executed. And so for me, having that well-rounded experience, I think, has definitely made me a far more successful executive. It made me not just be a figurehead, but actually a strategic business partner to our CEO and to our president and COO. So it's been a wonderful ride. Jumping ahead now to Ceridian, when I joined the organization back in 2015, they were really at an inflection point. There had been an acquisition by Ceridian of Dayforce, which was a small SaaS organization out of Toronto, but it was a reverse takeover. The CEO, David Ossip of Ceridian, came in and took the helm of Ceridian. Ceridian had been brought back public in 2007, had partnered with Dayforce in the early 2010, 2011 area, and then went through this acquisition in 2012. When I got there in 2015, one of the first things that I recognized was that while the two organizations had collided and become one, there was still a lot of independent operation within the organization. And I remember sitting in a meeting my first week on the job and listening to somebody talk about us and them. And I finally had to raise my hand and play the new girl card and say, help me understand who's us, who's them. And the woman across the table from me said, well, the way that you do it at Ceridian is this way. The way that we do it at Dayforce is this way. And I paused and I said, okay, I'm thoroughly confused because I was pretty sure we all worked for the company Ceridian and our product is called Dayforce. And it was at that moment that I realized, we had a lot of work to do if we wanted to, one, create value for our people, for our customers, and for our shareholders. And two, we were private equity backed. And I knew that there was going to be an exit strategy that needed to be facilitated at some point, and we couldn't do it where the company was at that time. So be careful what you wish for or what you identify as challenges, because it could become your job. And I'm so grateful and thankful to David for recognizing my strengths and what I bring to the table, because he tapped me on the shoulder and said, look, lead us down this path of transformation. We need to radically change our culture. We need to create value. We need to make this a place where people aspire to work and are proud to say they worked for when they talk about our organization. And so we launched that endeavor, and over 3 years, which in my opinion is a short time frame to go through a drastic transformation, we went from being one of the companies who was best known for all the wrong reasons on Glassdoor and other websites, to being a recipient of the top 100 companies for working mothers, the top 50 companies for working dads, a certified great place to work 5 years in a row, to Toronto, one of Canada's actually top 100 companies to work for. And it took the efforts of a lot of people. I would be remiss if I said that David and I did this, or even the executive team did this. We did this with the support and the encouragement and the belief of the 4,000 plus people who called Ceridian their employer of choice. And it led us to a highly successful IPO in April of 2018. We had a dual listing on the TSX and the NYSE. And we were identified as one of the most successful tech IPOs that year. Now, if you've watched Ceridian from that time, when we rang that bell on the New York Stock Exchange floor, which I was very honored to be a part of, we started trading at $22. And as of last week, we had gone over 90. So
Wow.
what I want people to hear about out of that story, or to take out of that story, is you can start from anywhere and radically change and transform an organization. But truly, the underpinnings of great organizations and the way that value is created is through people, through culture, and through technology. And I think that's the thing that many organizations miss, is they try to operationalize everything or streamline things, and they forget to focus on the things that really matter, which are people and culture. And it's what I've built my career around.
That is really cool. Going back to that meeting, whenever you said it was the two companies merging and you raised your hand and said, it's not us and them. What gave you the courage to sit there? Because that had to be, it sounds like it might have been a little bit of a tense meeting, and trying to merge two companies can't be easy. So what gives you the courage to go through and say, okay, this isn't working, we got to fix it?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, I've always thought that it's a little bit easier when you're kind of the new person, or you're kind of the outsider looking in, because people tend to listen to your voice a little bit more. I have found, for whatever reason, companies listen to consultants far more than they listen to their own people, when quite frankly, the answers sit inside your organization. A lot of times we just don't give people the proper authority to speak up, or we don't give them the platform to do their speaking from. I felt as if I had both. And I think part of that comes from, I'm a very direct individual. There's not a lot of stuff that scares me personally or professionally. And I thought it was my duty as a new associate or a new employee in the organization to ask the questions, because if my thought was, if not me, then who? If I'm not the one that's doing this, then who else is? And for how much longer Are we going to continue to behave in this way? And what are going to be the long-term implications? And so, I think it's important for people who are aspiring to move up in organizations or in their career, regardless of gender, to not be afraid to use your voice. It was given to you for a reason, and don't ask for permission. Don't be afraid if you don't have the right authority or job title, because ask yourself the question: if it's not you, who is it? And what's the harm that could be done if somebody's not asking those questions? For me, those things motivate me to want to raise my hand and say, "Whoa, stop the presses! This ain't working, folks."
Do you think that that has helped you really climb through the ranks and get to the levels that you did as an executive? That
Oh,
just
absolutely. Absolutely. Because I think there's been multiple times within my career where I've gone and I've challenged somebody in a higher level of authority or what have you, not in a way that is disruptive, but always in a way that my intentions are seeking good. I remember the first time early on in my career when I worked for another HCM company where I thought I was being grossly underpaid for the amount of contribution that I was making to the organization. And I remember coming home and talking to my fiance then at the time, and he's like, "Oh, you can't just walk into your boss's office and demand a raise." And I said, "Well, why can't I? Like, help me understand why I can't say that. Like, I'm being underpaid. Here's data. Here's what I've contributed. Here's the impacts that I'm having." And he's like, "Well, because that's going to get you fired." I said, "Well, if that gets me fired, then I don't want to work for the damn company. Like, get me out." I walked in and I asked for a raise, and 2 weeks later, my pay stub had gone up. So you're never going to get what you want when you're not asking the questions or when you're seeking that out. And that, I think, has been a guiding factor for me my entire life.
So thinking about it from that perspective, because I think a lot of people were like your then fiance, where you have that inherent fear that it's going to lead to, I don't know why it's the natural thing that you cling on to, that it's not going to work out.
Mm-hmm.
But I think so many people do cling to that. And so then whenever you're working as an executive, trying to lead people through this transformation of the two companies connecting, and you said that the culture was not that great, how do you tap into those people and get them to really advocate for themselves and ask for the work environment that they want? Because you clearly did something right if you ended up on all those lists, the best places and everywhere else.
Yeah, it sounds so stinking simple, but it really, really is. And I never put it into these words. I have to give credit where credit is due. A dear colleague, well, not colleague, but a dear mentor slash kind of friend of mine, Kat Cole, who is the president of Focus Brands, the Cinnabons, the Auntie Anne's. She said it to me in a way one time at a conference that I was at, that you've got to go to where the action is. You have to go to people who are closest to the action, and you have to give them the opportunity to share their insight. And I never really thought about it from that vantage point, but that's really how we did it at Ceridian. We took the time to go talk to our lowest paid employees in the organization. We went and sat down next to them in their work environment, and we asked the questions in a very open and fluid and transparent way. But most importantly, we listened with intent and we acted out of goodness. And I think that's the way that you create advocates. That's the way you create champions. You listen. You first you ask, you listen, and then you act. And what people became really accustomed to with us at Ceridian was like, look, we can say anything and know that that is going to be taken and used in the best possible light, not ever used against us. And not every organization can do that. I've worked for many who have tried and who have failed miserably. But again, it came back to we had a very talented team of leaders at all levels of the organization who, while had very diverse opinions, diverse thoughts, diverse backgrounds, they all had a common interest in putting our people over everything else, over our customers, over profitability, over our shareholders. And so we demonstrated that not just in what we said, but in how we behaved and in how we acted. And I think that's fundamentally the way to create followers. People want to walk alongside you, arm in arm, when they trust you, when they believe in what you're doing, and when they know that you truly do have their best interests at heart.
Trust, I think, was the key thing that I kept thinking the whole time that you were talking. And then you just said it there. It's so important for everybody to be on the same page and be united. So I think you were so forward thinking, going back to that meeting with that other person and saying it's not us and them, it's we're in this together, and then going through, and you must have been excellent at working with those other leaders to get everybody on board and then to build that trust. That really is incredible. And what is it, the repetition, do you think, of just the repeated telling these people to make them believe you can trust us, we're here for you, you matter, you are our number one? How do you convey that to them?
Well, I think it's, and this is honestly where I think a lot of organizations, well, I don't think, I know organizations have failed in this area because I've watched it happen. And that is, they try to orchestrate something that is not genuine and doesn't represent truly who the organization is. And I think that is one of the areas where we were so meticulous. And this is one of the things where when I consult with my clients now, it's like complete over and over and over repetition around, you've got to be authentic. You have to be genuine. You can't try to be somebody that you're not, because the whole definition of culture is basically the way we do things around here. And if you're trying to be this type of culture, but the way you things are done around here is polar opposite, you're going to create a lack of trust, if anything. And it's actually going to be even far more difficult to get to where you aspire to be. And that is really where we, in my opinion, we started at the most kind of basic area, which is let's define who we are. Let's define, and it doesn't matter if it's good, bad, or ugly. We have to be authentic to who we are right now. And then we can build upon that in terms of who we aspire to be. And we can select different people. We can create different programs. We can do all those other things, but we have to be honest with where we are starting from and then build a clear path on where we want to get to. And that really started with how we built our values. Before I arrived at Ceridian, there were jokes about how the values changed like every 18 months. I mean, from the time Ceridian was brought back private till David's company was acquired, David was the third CEO, and that was in 6 years. So as you can appreciate, every new CEO comes in, he or she has their values and, what we're going to do and how things are going to run. And then the new person comes in and sometimes it's a 180. David didn't come in and say, this is who we're going to be. We came in and said, let's identify who we are and who we aspire to be, and let's build a plan on how to get there. And, that was really where the brand promise of Ceridian came from, which their brand promise has been makes work life better. And they make work life better for their people, their customers, and their communities. And we lived and died by that. Every decision that was made, whether it was a product decision, a sales decision, a customer decision, a decision on a new program we were going to build, the question we always had to answer is, does this make work life better for the recipient of whatever it was? And if the answer was no, there was no debating it. It was a definitive, okay, it's no, go back to the drawing board and come back. And so I think for me, it is repetition, but it has to be repetition of the genuine, authentic elements of who you are. And then as you grow, then you can focus on your aspirations and build a plan of how you're going to get there. But you got to start somewhere, and you got to live up to where you are and be honest with the people of this is where we are, even if it's bad.
I totally agree with that. It's fascinating to see how people, it's almost like a dual thing where they don't want to acknowledge culture, but then they know that they have to because it's such a thing that's talked about these days. And so they just try to drive what they want. And it's never going to work because you have to figure out who you are then, who's there, what matters to them, what are those core values that you have or that they've believed, especially like you said, when they're separate companies and, or different CEOs. People are hired under one belief system and they are all in on that. And then you have a new person come in and it's this whole new thing. And you can't just rip that rug out from people that way. You have to figure out what matters to them. And by just trying to create new ones or saying, oh, this is who we are, sort of forget about all that other stuff, it's never going to work. It just makes
Nope.
people feel awkward and kind of unwanted, especially if the values change enough that it's not what they came in under and what they were believing.
Some people get caught up on like, oh, culture is the new buzzword or whatever, you know, like we talked about big data 5 years ago. Whatever you call it, I don't care if you call it culture, if you call it organizational effectiveness, if you call it people. The reality is people are what make your company work. They make your widgets, they make your product, they're your sales force, they're who creates revenue, they're who service your clients, they're, you know, who are out marketing your organization. They are human beings. And so people who don't understand the impacts and the value of culture, I find it really hard, honestly, to relate to, because I don't understand how you can be an executive or a leader for that matter in an organization and not understand how culture is key to your business outcomes, because culture is the way you do things around here. And the way you do things around here is all done by human beings. And so it's, I'm sometimes perplexed at how can people not make that connection. Maybe I simplify it too much in my head because I've spent, I won't tell you how many years because that ages me, but I've spent lots of years in this space. But it's absolutely instrumental to understand that people are what create value. People are what create differentiation. People are what create innovation. And all of those things are what create value for your organization, whether you're a publicly traded company, whether you're backed by a venture capital company or a private equity firm, it doesn't matter. People are what deliver outcomes to your organization. And it's not something that's fluffy. It's not something that's HR. Like that's the other thing that drives me crazy is a lot of times people would come to me over my career and say, well, Lisa, this is for you because you're HR. Every single person in the organization, regardless of their role, is responsible for the culture. They're responsible for what it is like to work at that organization. HR, in many instances, is just the strategic partner to the CEO and the COO, but it's everybody's responsibility, not just HR's.
That's 1000% correct. It's not just this person who, kind of like in The Wizard of Oz, who's creating
Yes,
culture and everybody is living that. You all create the culture. If you're unhappy and miserable when you come to work, that's part of what your culture is. That's
yep,
how it is. If you're an executive at a company and you're walking through the halls, not making eye contact and not saying hello, that's the culture you're creating. And it's fascinating to me that so many people that are so concerned with profit and Wall Street and everything that's happening there don't understand that people equal profit. When you
mm-hmm.
get that right, you're not going to have a problem. It's not like you have to pick people or profit. As you guys proved at Ceridian, when you treat the people right and you get that right, they will be loyal, they will trust you, and they will go that extra mile, which is going to equal profitability and success for everybody involved.
Absolutely. And it starts and ends with the CEO. And anybody that says that it doesn't, I will challenge them 100 times over. It starts and ends with the CEO, because in that moment, that individual is responsible for deciding who sits around them at that executive table. They are the one, to your point, that sets the tone. Do they walk down the hallways and pause and talk to employees, learn their names, get to know them? Or are they the ones that march themselves right into the conference room, maybe sit on a different floor, don't have that interaction? And I will say single-handedly, that is one of the reasons why I believe Ceridian has had such a successful go, is because of David Ossip. He was different. He thought differently. He came in and said, we are putting our people before our customers and before our shareholders. And as you can appreciate, some of the people sitting at the executive table were like, whoa, what? No, our customers come first. And if you look at a lot of the pyramids that you've seen over the years in sales presentations, like customers always get the biggest slice of the pie. At Ceridian, people got the biggest slice of the pie, because if you get your relationships right with your people, they will deliver outstanding customer service, and your customers will continually do repeat buying from you or stay with you. And that drives shareholder value. And so the concept of people over profit is not new. We didn't create it, but we not only embraced it, we lived it every single day. It was part of our DNA.